The train cut through the darkness like a silver blade, its windows glowing faintly against the black countryside. Midnight travelers leaned against cold glass, some sleeping, some lost in thought, all trusting the steady rhythm of the wheels beneath them. Then, without warning, the rhythm broke. The train shuddered, groaned, and came to a sudden stop in the middle of nowhere. No stations, no houses, just fields swallowed by fog and silence. Among the passengers sat Adil, a young journalist who had spent years chasing strange headlines but never imagined he would become one. He glanced around as murmurs spread through the carriage. The flickering lights made faces look pale and unfamiliar. Somewhere a phone rang, unanswered, before cutting off. The air felt charged, as if the night itself was holding its breath. At first, everyone waited for the conductor's voice, an announcement, some sign of control. But none came. And then it happened. A scream pierced the stillness from the rear of the train. By the time passengers rushed over, the seat was empty. A handbag sat abandoned, its contents scattered on the floor. No one had seen the person leave. No one had heard a door open. Fear spread quickly. Some tried to reason it away, suggesting the missing passenger had moved to another carriage. But when two more people vanished in the span of minutes, the whispers grew darker. The train felt less like a safe vessel and more like a trap. Every flicker of light made hearts jump. Every shadow seemed to stretch too far. Adil scribbled in his notebook, his instincts fighting with his fear. He couldn't help asking himself the same question everyone else was thinking. Who, or what, was taking them? The countryside outside was silent, as if the world had vanished beyond the windows. The fog pressed in, thick and endless. Then came the sound that froze him in place. 3 slow knocks against the glass beside his seat. Precise, deliberate, coming from the outside of a train, stranded in the middle of emptiness. His breath caught in his throat as he turned, only to see pale handprints fade into the mist. And before he could call out, the lights blinked once more, and someone else was gone. The train was no longer just a machine. It had become a cage. Every flicker of the dim lights made people glance at one another with suspicion, their fear growing heavier with each empty seat. Adil gripped his notebook tighter, though his hands trembled. He had written about missing persons before, covered countless unexplained disappearances in small towns and forgotten places. But never had the story been this close. Never had he felt like the next headline could be his own name. He tried to steady himself, focusing on details. There were about 40 passengers when the train stopped. Now, 3 were gone. A woman sobbed quietly, holding her child closer to her chest. An older man whispered prayers under his breath, rocking back and forth. Everyone else sat rigid, unwilling to move, as if staying still could keep them safe. Adil's mind kept drifting to the last words of his mentor, an editor who used to tease him about chasing ghosts. The truth isn't always in the facts, Adil. Sometimes it hides in the fear people carry with them. He never understood that advice fully, until now. Fear was everywhere on this train. It clung to the air like smoke, impossible to escape. The knock on the window replayed in his head. Outside was nothing but fog and fields, yet someone, or something, had touched the glass. He tried to convince himself it could be explained, that maybe the missing passengers had slipped quietly into another carriage, but the scattered belongings told a different story. No one leaves behind a bag, a phone, a coat, without a reason. The tension began to split the group. Some wanted to move forward to the engine, demanding answers from the conductor. Others insisted they stay put, convinced moving around would only invite danger. Arguments sparked, voices rising and echoing off the walls of the carriage. Adil noticed how quickly trust was breaking down. Strangers who had shared silence just an hour ago now looked at each other like enemies. And then the lights flickered again. Not off this time, but dimmer, weaker, like the life of the train itself was draining away. Adil's pen scratched across paper almost without thinking. Who controls the dark? He looked toward the far end of the carriage, and his breath caught. A shape. For a split second, he thought he saw someone standing just beyond the glass door. But when he blinked, it was gone. The silence returned, heavier than before. The child whimpered. The woman's prayers grew louder. Adil tried to calm his racing thoughts, but one truth refused to leave him. This wasn't random. Whatever was happening, it was deliberate, and the night had only just begun. The air in the carriage grew heavier with every passing minute, as though the fog outside was seeping through the cracks and suffocating them from within. Adil's eyes darted between the passengers, cataloging their faces, their panic, their silence. He had learned long ago that in crisis, people revealed who they truly were. Tonight, that lesson was writing itself in bold letters across the train. The first conflict broke out when a man in a dark suit stood and accused a young backpacker of knowing something. The missing woman's handbag had been found near his seat, and suspicion burned hot in the man's trembling voice. The boy denied it, swearing he hadn't even moved, but the confrontation spread like fire. Soon, voices clashed, fingers pointed, and the carriage became less about survival and more about blame. Adil tried to calm them, reminding them that fear could be deadlier than whatever was outside. But his voice barely carried. Deep down, he wasn't sure he believed his own words. He caught sight of the mother clutching her child, her eyes darting between the men like prey watching predators circle. Adil scribbled another line in his notebook. It isn't the darkness outside that scares them, it's the darkness inside. As the shouting died down, another subplot unfolded quietly in the corner. The elderly man who had been whispering prayers now muttered something else. Names. Adil leaned closer and caught fragments. Hussein, Farah, all gone. The old man's eyes were glassy, and for the first time, Adil realized the man wasn't just praying. He was remembering. What if this wasn't the first time he had seen something like this? The thought chilled him. Could there be a pattern? Was the train itself tied to a history of vanishing lives? The possibility hooked him. Even his fear gnawed at his chest. But the questions multiplying inside Adil weren't the only problems. The train suddenly groaned, shivering along its metal frame. The lights dimmed again, plunging them into half-darkness. The child whimpered louder, and the mother begged softly for the arguing men to be quiet. Adil pressed his notebook shut and forced himself to look at the group. Survival depended on unity, but trust was unraveling faster than the night outside. When the lights flickered back, Adil noticed something terrifying. The backpacker accused earlier was gone. His bag remained under the seat, his jacket still draped over the armrest. But he had vanished without a sound, right in the middle of the group. The silence that followed was deafening. Some gasped, others froze in disbelief. The suited man who had accused him now looked sick with guilt, his face pale as if drained of blood. The mother sobbed quietly, her child burying his face in her shoulder. Adil's pulse pounded in his ears. The disappearances were not random. They were targeted, deliberate. And worse, proximity didn't matter. People could vanish right in front of your eyes. He lifted his pen again with trembling fingers, writing the only words that came to him. No one is safe. And then from the carriage ahead came a slow, dragging sound, footsteps, or something imitating them. The dragging sound from the front carriage silenced every voice in an instant. Each step echoed like a warning, slow and deliberate, until even breathing felt dangerous. The passengers froze, staring at the glass door as though it might shatter inward at any second. Adil's heart hammered in his chest. His notebook lay forgotten on his lap. For the first time that night, he wished he weren't a journalist. He wished he were anywhere else. But he forced himself to look, to see, because part of him knew this moment mattered. Whatever was out there was about to show itself. Then silence. The footsteps stopped. The fog pressed harder against the windows, cloaking everything in a suffocating white. The old man broke the hush with a whisper, his voice trembling. This has happened before. Every eye turned to him. His lips quivered as he spoke of a train decades ago. One that vanished on the same stretch of track, its passengers never seen again. No official report, just rumors buried in small-town whispers. Adil's skin crawled. If the story was true, then tonight wasn't an accident. It was history repeating itself. The suited man stood suddenly, his voice cracking with desperation. "We can't just sit here waiting to disappear." His hands shook as he demanded they break into the conductor's cabin. Some passengers nodded, hungry for action. Others warned it was too dangerous. The argument flared again, louder, sharper this time. The mother with the child pleaded for calm, her voice breaking, but fear had already overtaken reason. People rose from their seats, shouting over one another, some pushing toward the front, others retreating back as though the very air ahead carried a curse. Adil pushed himself into the middle, trying to stop the chaos. But his words drowned in the storm of panic. He could see it clearly now. Fear wasn't just dividing them, it was feeding something. The disappearances came when panic peaked. What if that was the pattern? What if they themselves were fueling it? He opened his mouth to warn them, but then the lights flickered violently. Off, on, off again. Each blackout felt longer than the last, until time itself seemed to break. In the brief bursts of light, faces looked distorted, stretched in terror. When the lights steadied, 2 more seats were empty. This time, the suited man dropped to his knees, his eyes wide with horror. He had been standing next to one of the missing moments earlier. His guilt was unbearable. The mother clutched her son so tightly that he cried, his small hands pressing against her arms. The old man crossed himself again and again, whispering names Adil couldn't recognize. The dragging sound started once more. Closer now, measured, certain. Adil's instinct screamed at him to run, but his legs wouldn't move. He scribbled a single shaky line, "It's coming." And then the glass door at the end of the carriage rattled, as if something on the other side had finally decided to enter. The glass door rattled harder, each tremor rattling through the carriage like a heartbeat. The passengers shrank back, huddled together despite their mistrust. Then, as suddenly as it began, the shaking stopped. The silence was unbearable. Adil leaned forward, his pen trembling in his hand, waiting for whatever would come next. But instead of shattering glass, the door slid open, and standing there wasn't a creature, but the conductor. His uniform soaked with rain, his face pale and tight. Relief surged through the carriage, but it lasted only a breath. His eyes weren't those of a man. They were hollow, unfocused, like someone sleepwalking. The mother cried out, demanding answers, but the conductor didn't respond. He simply raised his hand and pointed to the suited man still kneeling on the floor. Before anyone could react, the lights blinked and the suited man was gone. His scream echoed, then cut off into nothingness. Panic erupted, but Adil's mind was racing. The disappearances weren't random. The conductor was choosing. And worse, he wasn't alone in this. That's when the twist unraveled. The old man, who had muttered prayers and stories of vanished trains, suddenly rose. His shaky voice steadied as he spoke. "It's always the same. The train demands balance. Some must be taken so others may live." Gasps spread. He wasn't a victim. He knew. He had always known. He wasn't praying for their survival. He was waiting for their turn. The betrayal hit harder than the darkness. The mother screamed at him, calling him a liar, while others lunged forward, trying to grab him. But the old man didn't fight. He only looked at Adil with a strange, weary calm. "You'll write this down, won't you? You'll tell the world. That's your purpose here." Adil's breath caught. Why him? Why the journalist? Unless he hadn't boarded this train by accident. The realization shook him. Was he chosen to? Not to vanish, but to witness? The carriage descended into chaos. Passengers shoved each other, some trying to force the doors open, others clawing at the old man in rage. But every flicker of the lights claimed another. Bags left behind, coats still warm, their owners gone without a trace. The mother clutched her son and screamed over the noise. "If it's balance it wants, take me, not him." Her voice cracked with desperation, a sacrifice offered in pure love. The lights flickered again. The old man smiled faintly, as though the train had accepted her bargain. But when the lights steadied, it wasn't the mother who was gone. It was her child. Her scream tore through the carriage, raw and shattering. And for the first time, Adil dropped his notebook. The story no longer mattered. Survival did. The mother's scream seemed to shake the walls of the carriage. Her child was gone, taken by the same unseen force that had swallowed the others. The passengers stood frozen, every face painted with shock, but none more shattered than hers. She clawed at the empty seat, rocking forward as if sheer will could bring him back. The old man didn't move. His calm expression lingered, as though he'd seen this play out countless times before. "The train chooses," he said softly. "It always has." Adil's blood boiled. He pushed forward, grabbing the old man by the collar. "If you knew, why didn't you stop it? Why didn't you tell us?" His voice cracked between fury and despair. The old man didn't resist. His eyes glistened with something close to pity. "I was spared once, long ago. My price was silence." The word struck Adil like a blade. The old man wasn't just a passenger. He was a survivor. And now, the cycle was repeating. Before Adil could demand more, the train lurched violently, throwing everyone against the walls. Lights flared bright, then plunged into darkness. When they came back, the conductor was gone too. Only the passengers remained, trembling in the dying light. For a heartbeat, there was hope. Maybe the nightmare had ended. Maybe the vanishings had stopped. But then the sound returned. Not footsteps this time. A steady, rhythmic knocking from the outside of every window. Dozens of hands pressing against the glass. Pale prints forming a circle around them. The passengers screamed, scattering, some collapsing to the floor, others clawing at the doors. The mother fell silent, staring blankly, as if her grief had consumed every part of her. And Adil, he finally understood. This wasn't about balance. This wasn't about survival. It was about witness. His notebook lay open, pages filled with frantic words, sketches of moments etched in fear. From the start, he hadn't been chosen to vanish. He'd been chosen to remember. The old man's voice cut through the chaos one last time. "It always spares one. The story must go on." The lights exploded in a final surge, blinding white. A deafening roar swallowed the carriage. And then, silence. When Adil opened his eyes, the train was moving again. Morning sunlight poured through the windows. The carriage was empty. Every seat abandoned. Every bag untouched. Only he remained. His hands shook as he turned the pages of his notebook, reading the frantic scrawl. Every detail was there. Every disappearance. Every scream. Proof that it had happened, or a curse to carry forever. Outside, the train slowed as it pulled into a station. People on the platform waited calmly, unaware of the night that had just consumed dozens of lives. And as Adil stepped off, notebook clutched to his chest, he noticed something that froze him in place. The child's toy, the one left behind, was tucked neatly into his own bag. When Adil stepped off the train, the early morning air felt unreal. The sun was gentle, warming the platform, yet his body shivered as though the fog of the night still clung to him. Around him, commuters bustled as if nothing had happened. They checked their phones, sipped their coffees, prepared for another ordinary day. No one looked twice at the empty carriages. No one asked where the missing passengers had gone. The station announcer's voice echoed overhead, calm and detached. "Arrival on time." The words rang hollow. On time for whom? Adil sat on a bench, clutching his notebook. He flipped through the pages, messy handwriting, half-finished sentences, frantic sketches. Proof of everything. Yet the longer he stared, the more unreal it seemed. Had it truly happened? Or had the night twisted itself into a story meant only for him? The old man's words returned to him like a curse. It always spares one. The story must go on. He thought of the mother, her desperate offer to sacrifice herself. He thought of the child's scream, cut short too soon. He thought of the suited man, the accusations, the guilt, the vanishing. Each face weighed on him, their final moments etched in silence. And then he remembered the toy. He pulled it from his bag, holding it in the sunlight. Its smallness broke him. This wasn't just memory. It was proof. The train had left its mark on him, and now he carried a piece of its truth. For the first time in years, the journalist's pen felt heavier than any weapon. He realized the purpose wasn't survival. It was testimony. If no one else would remember, he must. If no one else would tell the story, he had no choice. He opened the notebook to the final blank page and wrote slowly, carefully. If you are reading this, know that the train is still out there. It stops when the world is asleep. And when it does, it will take who it chooses. But it will always leave one behind, to remember and to warn. He closed the book, his hand steady now. The fog of the night had lifted, but the weight of its secret had not. Adil stood, his reflection caught in the station glass, looking older, more fragile, but also resolute. The world moved on around him, unaware. But he knew the truth, and the truth demanded to be shared. He whispered to himself, almost as a vow, stories aren't just told. They're warnings. And then, notebook in hand, he walked into the crowd, ready to carry the burden forward.